After weeks of speculation, the day has finally come. The Department of Natural Resources Secretary Emily Timmons plans to announce her run for governor. And this comes as little surprise to the state's current governor, Sheila Johnson. She always knew that Emily was ambitious, but figured that giving her a high-profile job would be enough to satiate her ambition for the time being. But she was wrong. But ever the savvy politician, Governor Johnson organizes a press conference for the exact same time as Secretary Timmons' campaign launch event. And at this press conference, she will proudly announce that Spasm Electronics will be opening a new factory here in Magnolia County. And this is a big deal because it's the reshoring of a company that's had its manufacturing in Shenzhen for decades. And despite having strong roots in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota, this company has chosen Magnolia County Superior as its new home due to the state's significant investment in higher education and shipping infrastructure. And while the company has been interested in Magnolia County ever since the opening of Johnson Aggregates copper mine and the new university, the governor's office has been slow walking the announcement until it would be the most politically advantageous. And that time's right now. And at 5 p.m., Superior residents are treated to a split-screen event on KSUP. On the left, the governor is proudly proclaiming that this is progress not just for Magnolia County and Superior, but also for manufacturing in the upper Midwest as a whole. And on the right, Secretary Timmons promises a new day for Superior, where corporations will have a seat at the table, but not run the table. They'll be able to work within the system, but not run the system. One resident in particular is disgusted with everything that he's seeing. Chuckles. Why must there always be this so-called progress? Wasn't the fire enough to show everyone that all of this development is damaging the delicate balance of the area's ecosystem and leading to catastrophe after catastrophe? Who is going to speak for his concerns? Later that week, Chuckles meets up with Nick and his neighbor Daryl for a cup of coffee at King Bait. And after 30 straight minutes of complaining about the candidates, Daryl interrupts Chuckles and says that the only way things are going to change is if someone like him runs for office. Chuckles laughs initially, but starts to give it some thought. Should he do it? In this episode, we're going to focus on constructing one primary thing, the Switchon factory's signature building. We'll give thought to how the asset should be placed and build a cohesive development around it. We'll also ensure that that development has ample power and build a number of farms and specialized industries in the vicinity to expand the rural areas of the county. And if you think that Chuckles should run for governor, hit the like button. And if you think that he should go back to being a clown, hit the like button for that too, and let me know how you feel down in the comments. Or leave an emoji letting me know how you feel for the sake of engagement. And without any further ado, let's jump right in. Hello and welcome back to Magnolia County. And in today's episode, we're going to be focusing primarily on one signature building, the Switchon factory. And that might sound a little bit strange considering the scope of some of the projects that we've taken on in the county, but I think it makes a ton of sense. You see, just like some of these other large projects, this is really something that the county will be known for. The Switchon factory employs about 1,500 employees, and it's something that we've been talking about all the way back to episode 6 when the business park was built. But the workforce just wasn't educated enough to support the factory. But now that we have the university and we have the mine, we have both the resources and the employees for the factory. So on that note, I want to talk about how I've thought about locating the factory. First of all, I want to make sure we have easy access to a highway, which we have right here. I want easy access to the port, which the highway provides. And I want easy access to the university, considering they would likely provide employees and maybe even students for internships and things of that nature. So as a result, I've been looking at this location right here as a potential excellent location for this factory. So right here is the site that we were just looking at. So we're going to purchase this one, but I don't want to stop here. I want to purchase a couple of tiles around here for some rural development, which is something that we've been neglecting over the past few episodes. And that's the other thing that we're going to be focusing on quite a bit today. Now, I have a feeling that we're going to be purchasing more tiles than this because of our power connection. I think that the only connection that we have is actually right here, and it leads to the outside world. So we'd be importing all of our power for this factory, and that is not exactly what we want to do. So we'll spend about $500,000 purchasing these tiles, and then we are going to extend out our Jeffersonian grid. And for that, I am going to switch over to our alleyways. And again, I want to use the alleyways as our country roads, and we will use our gravel roads as driveways into some of the facilities, such as farms and things of that nature. Now you can start to see that the contour lines are dipping, and I don't want to just be completely disrespectful to the topography. So we are going to clean up a couple of things right here. And for that, we are going to be using our complex curve tool. So for instance, right here, it would make some sense to me to come up to right about here. Then we'll go over to get around that bend where our terrain goes up. And then we'll pull that up right here. Same thing right here. I kind of think that going along the tree line would make a ton of sense. And then over here, rather than attempting to extend this road out, what I think that we'll do is try to have a nice 90 connection to make our left-hand turn, and then we'll leave a sweeping movement right here. So we'll just do something like this. And the main reason that we're doing this is most of these movements are likely going to be turning right anyway. Now that we've done this, before we move on, I do want to upgrade some of these other dirt roads to be paved. And it's interesting. I'm not sure why we have these at different locations, but what I think I'm going to do is eliminate this one. And we'll go with these. And let's double check that. Yeah, this one is correct. This other one was wrong. Looks like I screwed it up at some point in time. Never bad to go back and check your work. And with our roadway layout in place, let's move on to building the Switchon factory. And now it's finally time to place the Switchon factory. This is available underneath signature buildings and industrial signature buildings, and it's right here. Now this unlocks when you have 100 level 5 industrial buildings and a college campus. But here's the thing, I want to think a lot about orientation of the building and giving it the proper space it needs to do a little bit of decorating around it. Now, one of the things that I know about buildings like this is they often don't have enough parking for what they are. And I know that I'm personally tempted to place these right on the road, but if you do that, they end up looking really strange. So you've got to set it back a little ways. I want to back this up maybe 6 units on all sides. And you can see that it has a number of things that it wants. It wants a road connection right here and another one right here. This is some sort of pedestrian connection that we can make. And around the backside, another pedestrian connection and really nothing else. But that makes me think that we could probably have parking on the back and have it work really, really well. Let's go ahead and add some alley connections into this building. And I want to turn off the snapping to zoning cell and the zoning cell grid so that we can snap onto the building. You can see we actually find the center right there of that road. We can pull this right in. We'll do the exact same thing down here. And it's always interesting to me that it only figures out that it's disconnected after the other road gets a connection. And there we go. That's right in the center. I think that's all that we need. Now, one thing that bothers me is that now that we've made these connections, it looks like we just have a whole bunch of the same road everywhere. So I think we are going to urbanize the road up to this facility. And I'm urbanizing this a little ways down, but that's only because we're going to have a road going on the back to reach our parking lots. So I think that we'll take this all the way to here, and we are likely going to want to add turn lanes as well, but we'll cross that bridge a little bit later on. So now I do want to add that road to the back of this facility so we can get some parking going for this, because I only see these couple of parking stalls right here. I assume that that is guest parking. This is maybe some parking for vehicles for the building itself. So we're going to need parking for all of the workers at this facility. So let's turn on snapping to zoning cells again. And I'll come a couple of units away from the building. Now I just want to check on this. 1,502 employees. Now here's an interesting thought. In reality, we would probably want to see, at least by a zoning code, 1 parking stall per every 4 employees or something of that nature. And the factory itself might even push to have 1 parking stall per employee, considering there won't be transit service out here for some time. It's too rural for that. So we are going to do something that's less extreme. We'll make ourselves happier by not doing that, and it's going to look a ton better. But that is the way that it would likely take place in reality. There would be a parking standard, and they might even want to exceed that so that they can attract employees. And I want to make sure that we're lining up. We're going to use 2 on either side and then 2 in the back. And I want the middle to line up with this entryway right here, which is why we left a little bit of space. So now I'm going to run a road right back here. And I know that this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units back. And because I can't count, I will put this the wrong number of units back. 3, 4, 5. Okay, there we go. I can count. And I'll run that back. And I'm going to completely center these on here. So you might wonder why I have the gap here. I think I want to try to put some sort of path through here. And then we'll cover it up with our pavement decal. Now that we have those, not decal, but our pavement surface. That's what it's called. But before we do that, I want to spread things out a little bit here. So we're going to use our replace tool. And I'm going to turn off existing geometry and zoning cell length and just bump this back a little ways. And I basically want to make sure that I'm giving myself enough space to be able to landscape in front of the parking lot. We'll do the exact same thing over here, though. I'm going to hold it down and pull it back a ways like that. And then over here, we'll run a road right down. And I'm not satisfied with the way that this looks, partially because that's not a 90. That's crazy. But mostly because I want to make sure that we have gentle curves around here, because there is a chance that you could see large vehicles using this road, even if it's just inadvertently. So we'll do something like that to gentle things up. And now that I think about this, our parking lot's a little bit strange in that it's not symmetrical on both sides right now. So what I'm going to do is run this right here. I don't know what this thing is doing to me right now. It is creating like partial nodes and other oddities. So, oh, look at what oh, that is bizarre. Just bizarre. Okay, we'll try this again. And we'll do something like that. So this is pretty ugly, but I think that if we use our complex curve tool, we can make a nice connection in here. And that was a failure, so we'll try again. On Cities Skylines, I'm not going to let you beat me. I'm going to win. That looks significantly better. And now we've got gentle curves all the way through here. Now, you might have noticed I made a connection right here. And the primary reason for that is I think that fire codes likely wouldn't dictate that they could only have one entrance in to this large parking facility with so many parking stalls back here. So just for some perspective, this is 56 parking stalls right here. So we've got about 200 for this entire facility. So going back to the example that we used before of one parking stall per 4 employees, if that were the case, we would need 375 parking stalls at this facility. So we have a little over half of what we actually need. But again, we're not going to meet that parking requirement, that arbitrary parking requirement. We're just going to go with what feels good to us, which is going to be about 200 parking stalls. So I'm noticing that we do not have power connections or water connections here. So I want to start thinking about those. So let's begin with our water connection. And what I'll do is head this underneath the highway, right where it can go. And then we'll start making our way towards the university. Now there's this road right here. We don't have to make this connection, but while we're over here, I think it's good practice just to always make connections when you're passing them. And then right here is our connection into the rest of our grid. And we should be fine for water and sewer now. And you see that power is the only thing that is upset. But here's the thing. This one's going to be a little bit more complicated than it might seem. Now, there are two ways that we could approach this right off the bat that I can think of. We could add lights to our highway, and that should make a connection. But I think we're going to bottleneck if we do that because we're a long ways away from the rest of the network, relying on one simple path to make this connection to a facility that would draw a lot of power. The other thing that we could do is add a transformer and hook it up to this high voltage line. And again, that seems to make perfect sense as well until you realize that this high voltage line goes to the outside of the region, but it doesn't actually go all the way over to our power plant. It ends right here. So I think in a moment, we are probably going to need to think about this a little more comprehensively and maybe connect up this line that goes to the outside world to our existing power grid. But before we do that, I'm thinking it might make some sense to add a battery station over here and connect up with this outside connection. Now, the reason why I like this battery facility over here is it would prevent overdrawing and potentially spread out some of the strain on the grid. So it makes some sense considering we'll likely have other industrial buildings over here in the future. But reasonably, the main reason I want to place it is it's kind of industrial looking in nature. It almost looks like a bunch of warehousing. So I'm going to place that right about here. I do want to turn off roadway snapping again, and we'll line up our entryway into our battery station with this road that we have right here. And I just backed that up just far enough that we get the extension there, but close enough that it still maintains the connection. This building's strange. It wants the road connection right here. So we can make it look good by backing it up a little ways without losing that roadway connection. And that makes it absolutely perfect. Now I'm guessing, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing I can use this as a transformer. Now, interestingly, as we take a look at this, it looks like it's discharging power to the network. So we're not actually importing power from the region for whatever reason. We are actually using the power that the battery initially had once we placed it to power up our factory. So this is not a long-term solution. We are going to need to resolve this in short order. And to resolve this issue, I think that we're going to need to establish some new high voltage connections. Before we make a high voltage connection over to the rest of our city, I want to do a little bit of troubleshooting. And one thing I'm not sure about, like I mentioned, is whether or not this can actually act as a transformer. So I want to add an actual transformer in this area to see if it transfers power from the high voltage line to our local roads. So we're going to grab the transformer, and we could place that right next to the station, but I think it'd be a little bit cluttered with our power lines. So I might add that right over here, because we've got our high voltage line cutting right through and an area where not really much else would be suitable. So I think we'll place that right about here. Popping into our power view, we should be able to see flow from this high voltage line to our transformer and then over to Hawthorne Lane, and we're just not seeing it. This is what it looks like when it's working. You can see it over here. We've got the high voltage line, and it is showing the direction that power is flowing right here from the outside world to a transformer near downtown Bend, and over here from our power plant over to Nicolay Bay. So we're clearly having issues still. Now this makes me think about two other things that we could do. Obviously, we could run a low voltage line to this area. I don't think that's going to be suitable. I don't think that's going to work. I think we're going to bottleneck. The other thing that it's making me wonder is it actually possible to have one of these battery stations without a power plant connected to it? Reasonably, I think we should be able to do it, but it does make me wonder if it is not possible. So I'm going to disconnect this thing, or I wonder if I can just turn it off, if that would do the trick. Now, reasonably, with this thing off, this shouldn't be powered. However, it seems to be okay. Would you believe that? Look at that. We've got power flowing into the transformer now. So that leads me to believe that if we have this off, it'll work. And if we have it on, it will not. So this must be connected to a power plant to function, which is good to know, honestly, very good to know. So what I think we're going to do is make a connection from our high voltage line over here to our power plant over there. So we're going to have to buy a number of tiles to make this possible, because you can see that the high voltage line currently ends in a tile that we no longer own, or we never own, not that we no longer own. So I'm going to need to extend this over to Charity Island, and then we're going to need to make a connection over to our existing high voltage line. Now, the unfortunate thing is, I think ideally we would connect right over here into our transformer and kind of run this along the industrial highway, but that's not going to work for us because we've built this beautiful beach right here. So I think it might be time for a little bit of a mulligan or a really wonky power connection. Honestly, maybe we go for the really wonky power connection and just connect this up over here, cross over the rail, and then make our connection. So let's begin that right now. And now I can't make this little tiny connection, so we are gonna have to buy just one tile, and whoa, that is not where I wanted to be. Right about here, I believe, is the tile that we need. So we'll buy this. Actually, no, it's not that one. It's this one right here. We'll buy this tile, and now hopefully we'll be able to just bridge this right over the top. And there we go. I did a little bit of cleanup of these lines to make them a little bit straighter, and I think that things are looking really good. And as soon as we have them connected, you can see that we have power flowing from our power plant to our battery station over here and even to the outside world. Now, I am curious, can I get rid of this transformer, or will we have problems? And it appears that this does work as a transformer, but only if it's connected to a power plant. It is indeed charging, and things are working just fine over here. So a little convoluted, but I feel like we learned something about the way that power works in this game, so I'm pretty pleased with it. And now with our power situation figured out, let's build a shopping center. Now, I'm guessing building a shopping center seems like kind of a strange choice right now, but if you think about it, this factory employs about the same number of people that could live in a small town. So this is now Spasm Electronics, and it has the potential to employ 1,505 employees. Now, all of those employees are going to need places to go shopping after work. They might want to pick up lunch. They might want to drop off their dry cleaning or maybe even buy electronics. They also might need a daycare or a place to get their taxes prepared. So any number of things that could really be nice uses to go alongside this. The other thing that this will allow people to do is link their trips. And that's a really powerful concept. That's the idea that rather than making two separate trips for shopping and going to work, you're able to combine those trips and save overall VMT or vehicular miles traveled as a result. So it's a good planning practice to link these sorts of complementary uses or place them and locate them close to one another. So we are going to build a shopping center right here, right across the street, even though there's really nothing else in this area right now. Now, I want this to feel fairly rural, so we are going to have a frontage road to the shopping center. We're going to set this back a little ways. This will also preserve space for expansion of this road in the future should we need it. Now, before we build anything, I want to think about grading. I'm already kind of screwing up a little bit, so let's make sure we don't do that anymore. We'll just carve into the hillside a little bit. And no harm, no foul right here. Now, I have a very specific design in mind for the shopping center. So I want to snap only to existing geometry, zoning cell length, and the grid. This is very important because we could screw this up very, very, very quickly. Now, I know I want to pull this up at 90-degree angles. So we're going to pull this straight up here, and I can already see we've got an issue. Our zoning grid is already broken, so I'm going to back this out, and we'll go for attempt number 2, and that is fix things here. Now, this is really important because I want to add a parking lot. Oh, look at that. It's not even snapping to the grid. Attempt 2, we'll build this without connecting it to this road, and we'll build our parking lots right there. We'll follow the grid, and I want to reverse the parking lots because I want them to face the buildings that we are about to place. And then I want to be incredibly deliberate with the buildings that we spawn in. Now, I want this to feel like a strip shopping center, so I want these buildings to not have parking included with them. And I know that the 5x5 assets do an excellent job of this. So we're going to zone one right here, and one right here. And along with that, we'll add a couple more on the side. And if we get situations like this where we get two buildings spawning in, all we have to do is delete and hold and just keep up the good work until we get that 5x5 building. And even if it spawns in the wrong road because you've inadvertently left a road alongside here, you can delete that too and have it spawn in the right road. Now, we're not done just yet. Obviously, this has to fill in, and I want this connected to the road so we have power. And then we need to make sure that we have roads going to the rear of here for freight and things of that nature. So I'm going to extend this back here. We'll run that along the back end. And then what I'm thinking is we are going to have a couple of offices right here. These will be lower visibility. You'll have to walk from the parking to get over to these offices, but they should be fine. Offices are destinations, so if you have to walk a little ways, not the end of the world. Commercial, on the other hand, could suffer from that sort of treatment. There we go. We get 3 commercial buildings. And then over here, I want a bit of a festival space. So we are going to extend a road back here. And this will help us with our freight access to this commercial building. And then I figure we'll make a completely custom park over here. Something really tiny. And honestly, this kind of looks like our little gazebo park that we have. And now that we have our surfaces, we can do something special here as well. We'll go with maybe a tile surface right in the center. And on the outside, we're going to have to do this in 2 halves because I can't overlap these. So we'll have one surface right here that covers the outside. And then another one. Actually, this is for the outside. That was the inside. This is the outside. I know the difference. Look at that. Absolutely lovely. So we will do a bit of decorating through here, picnic benches and maybe some booths so that it looks like a farmer's market. But for the time being, that is a good start. Now, I just want to let this fill in and remove some of the landscaping. And bluntly, as I look at this, I think it looks exactly like I was hoping. The one thing that's a little bit off, this building is clearly facing the wrong direction, and we've got to solve that. So we'll just hit that once, twice, 3 times, and you can tell when it's facing the right direction when the opening's the right way. There we go. Finally got it in the right direction. I'm also noticing that some of these may not necessarily need these back roads. So if we take a look, yeah, I actually don't think that rear road is necessary because it has this drive right here that allows you access to the garbages. So I'm going to look at all of these, and yeah, if they're like that, maybe we just get rid of this rear road because it's not benefiting us at all. And there we go. We get that oppressive little shopping center look. And I also think that we could shrink up this road. I'm going to try a move that sometimes works and often does not. I'm going to add a node. And would you look at that and let me get away with when I was able to delete from that node and really clean things up. And with our shopping center done, let's move on to building some farms and specialized industries. For our farms and specialized industries, I'm going to focus on the areas that we've unlocked today, basically in between this highway here and this back line right here. I'm going to try to make sure that all of these industries have regular shapes that make sense and not circular shapes that you might get if you were to follow the tool as closely as you could. And then I also want to make sure that we're building things that we actually need. So let's take a look at our production chain, and we can see that we actually really need lumber, and we can also use cotton and vegetables. Anything else is kind of secondary. Obviously, we have a lot of chickens at this point in time, so I don't need to worry all that much about that. And then let's take a look at what resources we have here. Fertile ground. Look at all that beautiful fertile ground. The one thing that I was wondering about was maybe oil, and we don't have that here. We've got a little bit over here, but nothing in this general area. So we'll go 100% farming with the exception of a little bit of forestry. And actually, we should probably have an aggregate mine over here as well, considering that there is development occurring over in this part of the community as well. So let's go with both the forestry and aggregate first, and then we'll add in a couple of our vegetable and cotton fields. And there we go. I think that this industry is looking pretty good. I did want to do something that's a little bit unnatural. I wanted to add this 90-degree angle here to represent that someone else owns this property, and as a result, you'll see a fairly unnatural cut right into this forest at some point in time. I think it's going to look really interesting. Now, right here, I'm thinking that we're going to have a farm and an aggregate mine. So I want to reserve space back here for the farm, and then at this end, we will have our aggregate mine. And now I want to start adding farms, and I think we'll start with our first one back here, and we will go with that vegetable textile farming. And let's see, if I get this just right, I think we can cover most of the territory. And actually, maybe I'll scoot it over and have a little patch of forest. And then let's add a few more through here as well. I'm going to try to my best to avoid encroaching upon the forest though, so we'll have some smaller farms as a result. And there we go. There's a good mixture of farms there, and I feel like the shapes are fairly organic and normal looking, so I'm pleased with that as well. I do want to think a little bit about these areas, and honestly, I'm thinking that because these are heavily forested, maybe we just have a couple of homes back there. So we're going to go with some dirt roads and make a couple of small rural subdivisions. Oh boy, when the zoning decides to be obnoxious, it decides to be obnoxious. But this is generally what I wanted to go with, something that is a big cul-de-sac where there's no reason to go in here unless you live here, and then a couple of other small things like this. And we'll probably add a home up here as well. And there we go. I think that that is looking really outstanding. Now, there are other places where we could add homes, and I'm thinking that back here, this wouldn't just be an empty forest. There would be something going on back here. So once again, I'm going to add some homes. We're going to follow the contour lines for this, though. There we go, just a bit of rural development. I'm going to leave a bit of this land undeveloped. Sometimes you just have stuff like that too, so it makes sense to leave a bit of that. And now that we've added all of our specialized industries and some rural development, I think it's time that we move on to a bit of landscaping and detailing. And for our landscaping and detailing today, there are 3 things that we're going to do. The first is we're going to really densen up the forest and add some trees in between all of our farms. Second, we are going to focus on our little shopping center and make sure that we have a farmer's marketplace right here, like we mentioned. And then finally, we're going to add trails and a bunch of really detailed landscaping around our factory. So with that in mind, let's get started. All right, and there we go. We've done a little bit of everything. So let me kind of recap just a little bit. Basically, in between all of the farms, I've decided to have a variety of trees. I've planted everything as small trees based on some feedback that I've been seeing, with the exception of a couple of oaks here and there. And then I've also added a bit of screening for some of these uses so that they wouldn't have to deal with the noise of the road, even though not much right now, but at some point in time, I assume that there will be. Now, one interesting thing right here. Take a look at the scale of this asset compared to these. So we've got a farm right here. One thing I noticed is that we've got some of these excavators and they are the same size as barns. So a little bit of a scaling hilarity right there, but still looks very, very good. So I've gone through each of these and basically done all of that, and you can see pretty thick bits of landscaping in between. I've also decided to densify, to add density to the forest over here, which I think is going to make it look a lot better down the line, and added some trees over here as well for some privacy. And then over at our shopping center, we've added a whole bunch of activity here, or theoretical activity. We've got a little farmer's market set up right here, and I think it looks pretty good. And then I've made sure to take all the parking lots and remove the cost associated with parking in them, and added trees to the side of the road so that we don't have any street parking. So we're starting to see some activity within our parking lots. And then most of the landscaping is actually taking place here at the factory. And again, baby trees, lots of apple trees, some oak trees. And I tried to make some patterns to make this look like it's been well thought out. Like there was a landscaping plan done for this building, because I would fully expect that here. Now, one thing I've tried to back myself away from is lining all paths with bushes. That's not the way it is in reality, but I have this tendency to do that in Cities Skylines too. I'm not sure if you have that experience too, but it's just something that I find myself enjoying doing and doing too often. So I'm taking a step back. And then most of the work was done here in the rear. And take a look at this. We're actually starting to see activity behind the building, and we've done something interesting right here. I decided to have a little bit of a half moon right here and added a crosswalk, and people are actually walking from the parking behind the building to the building itself and milling around, which I think is pretty neat. And then apparently it's bring your dog to work day. That's what everyone's deciding to do, but we're gonna accept it. It's completely fine. Then I've done a lot of work to this parking lot right here. I figured out that if you have the surface tool and you back in the surfaces just a hair, they stop bleeding to the roads and whatnot. So that gives you the opportunity to actually do some interesting things like islands right here, which would be useful if you want to add some landscaping or just a little bit less impervious surface area, which is what I wanted to do. So And then finally, I decided to add a path back here. And this path, the reason why I wanted to add this was so that we could have a little picnic area back here and give the employees a place to exercise a little bit during the workday. This is something that you're seeing a lot more employers do. It actually helps them with their insurance costs, or so I've been told. So that is one of the reasons why it's there. It's also an amenity that you'd be able to advertise to prospective employees. So all in all, I'm really pleased with the way that this has turned out. And I think there's only one more thing left to do. That's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour, or whatever this is. And for the last hour or so, I've been going through the build naming things, many of them based on your feedback. So let's go through some of them right now. And the very first one that I want to point out is one that Frappons recommended, and that is Memorial Avenue. And we put that right here going down and over the top of the highway and around the Remembrance Park. And I think it's the perfect name for this. But that's not the only great name. We also have a name from Troy, Phoenix Avenue. This will eventually just kind of go along the coast, but because of the way the naming works right now, it goes all over the place. But like a phoenix rises from the ashes, so is our community coming out bigger, better, and stronger than ever. And right beneath that comment, Jake Champion recommended a number of names, and you can see those all right here: Freedom Way, Liberty Street, Honor Street, Respect Drive, all sorts of great names. And I really like those. They're cohesive. It feels like they were named as part of a theme. And speaking of themes, Nicola recommended that we go with some bird themes, or themes in general, but then listed a bunch of bird themes, and I decided to take those and add a couple more myself. And then finally, David recommended some apple names, and I thought it really fit in nicely into this neighborhood where we'd already named most of the streets based on trees. So I've added in Macintosh Drive, Crabapple Street, and Mayapple Place. So really appreciate all of those naming suggestions. And I appreciate the naming suggestions that everyone gave, and it really caused me to go off the deep end. I spent about an hour, like I mentioned, renaming things. Everything from the highway to ramps, I renamed ramps. And even over in the new part of the build that we just worked on today, which I've got to find, where am I? I've gone ahead and renamed things Private Street, Power Street, Spasm Street, which kind of a not great name, but that's the name of the company, so we're going to name it after the company. And I've gone ahead and named many of the streets through here as well. So lots and lots of things have been named throughout the entire build. And with that in mind, I do want to encourage you to check out the save, which I will make available because it's so dramatically different than the last one that I made available. So if you want to check that out, go to the Discord. There will be a link to it in the Discord under announcements. And then the very last thing I want to say about naming is that there are a number of towns that need names now. So if you want to give one of these towns a name, let me know which town you want to name. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's a couple more over here, 6, 7, and 8. So if you want to name any of these towns, let me know which town you want to name and what name you think it should have down in the video comments below. And then lastly, I want to know if you see anything wrong with what we're looking at right now. We're on Charity Island looking at this football stadium. I didn't see it, but Molly certainly did, and I appreciate this. This is actually backwards. This burnt down in the fire, and when I placed it in the wrong direction. So let's get this fixed. And the way that I was able to get this fixed is I placed a high school facing this private drive right here, and that got the stadium in the right direction. Before I had placed the high school facing this way on Chirper or Grand Avenue, and that's why this was facing the wrong direction. So Molly, thank you so much for that. I totally missed that, and I really appreciate that feedback. And with that, I think we're gonna leave it here, and I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please consider hitting the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I really want to thank you for your time today. This was a really fun episode for me. It's a little bit slower paced, but sometimes you've got to have those slower paced episodes so you can do big things down the line. And I appreciate you for sticking with me through it. Thank you so much. Can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care and bye-bye.